I went to the Pasadena Jewish Temple and Center. I went to a Shabbat service. I'd never been to a Jewish temple before for services, so it was really interesting. Um, it was bizarre feeling walking into a service of a religion that was not mine. And that strange feeling of, am I going to be welcome? Am I going to be judged? What if I mess something up? What if I don't know how to do something? I wondered if this is how it feels for people who aren't Christian, or for anyone to walk into a service and they're not familiar with the religion. So it was a really kind of cool moment where I got to kind of experience the other side, and it's very intimidating. Even with well intentions, I didn't know if I had to wear a hat or to do anything. So it was interesting. But they were very welcoming. I was welcome with my friends. We kind of came in a group, and so we grabbed a book, a little program, sat down, and the main core practices of the Shabbat service was the worship. The rabbi spoke in this sort of welcoming of Shabbat. The welcoming of Shabbat, it felt like welcoming of this like force of peace, this sort of welcoming the energy of Shabbat, what that means, which I'm not 100% sure. Um, but the feeling in the room and sort of the preparing oneself to be welcomed in. We even turned towards the door as we welcome Shabbat in, sort of this like invisible force. Um, Kind of a thing. The service is very not user friendly in terms of even the book was backwards. So it took me a second to make sure I wasn't reading it upside down. It was a little disorienting. Um, but the worship leader began the service, just came up into the aisles and engaging people in song as people were sitting down. It wasn't a formal, welcome and let's stand and worship, like what I'm used to. It was very just organic. Um, it felt very joyful. It felt very warm. Mostly demographics, so mostly white, mostly older. There were some minorities there, families there. It felt very family friendly. Um, I would say probably middle class for the most part, and so mostly a homogenous group. But there are some pockets of others. The rabbi asked if there are visitors, specifically from Fuller. So apparently Fuller students do this a lot, probably before this class. And so that was interesting to kind of be called out as a Fuller student. And so that also made me kind of feel a little out of place, like I was imposing, because I'm there just for the sake of a class, not there for really my own curiosity, or my own interests in their practices. It's to fill the class requirement. So it was an enlightening experience, but it's because of the class that I found myself there. So overall, it was a good experience. So even though we didn't understand, where we were in the program or what we were reading, it was all in Hebrew, not much English. It There were people that would come and kind of help us out and kind of point us to the right page, and so it was really I felt very welcome and warm. After that, they had a Kiddush ceremony. So they opened up this big banquet hall. They had food set up. It almost seemed like an anniversary celebration. So this seemed to be something that they did every Friday night. And so I really liked the um, invitation to kind of remain and be. So there was the ceremony, not the ceremony, but there's service together. And then they did life together. They welcomed in Shabbat, and then their first order of business in Shabbat was to meet and greet and eat together. And so that was a really kind of cool celebration of community. It was also very more politically focused than I expected. The rabbi talked about the state of the country and the election and voting, and so it was very much more civilly minded or civic focused. It was also interesting to hear similar scriptures in the Old Testament about God and love and neighbor, and not have it move towards the conclusion of Jesus. So it left it very open-ended. I think that does give room for people to have very different opinions and to come down on different sides of an issue, because you're left with, the love of God, um, the oneness with Shabbat and each other, versus in Christian services, we can talk about love and grace, but at the end we're always tying it back to Jesus and give your life to Christ. So it's a very kind of like, here's what we want you to conclude. So the Shabbat service, it felt very like you conclude whatever you want or discuss it. So I really appreciated that fact. Although it was interesting, I kept wanting to be like, what about Jesus, or where do we go with this? They're also very family focused. So I was thinking about where I was seeing God, and definitely saw his fingerprints in just how they love one another, how they support one another. They honored marriages that had been together for, I think they were celebrating their 60-year anniversary. So, and it didn't felt like marriage was made an idol like sometimes it has in kind of mainstream Protestant Christian circles, where if you're not married, something's wrong with you. But it really was a celebration of um, a couple who has walked together for 60 years and be able to share that with the congregation. And they also had stories of another couple who went to on the East Coast and opened up a synagogue there. And so it was just very like celebration of people, and family, very family, like the big body family. So I really appreciated that. So interesting. Yeah, so I appreciated the experience, and definitely saw the similarities between Judaism and Christianity, and I think the most important things, the warmth, the acceptance, definitely translates. So very cool experience.